What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Social Standard Podcast. My guest today is social media savant, Reynolds. So, Bree is currently the social media manager for Lyft, which is doing some really incredible things on Threads and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all of the socials. So we're excited to talk to her about that. And before she landed at Lyft, she was also a social media manager at Adobe, where she grew their Adobe brand channel from nothing to 200,000 followers in just, I believe, under 2 years. And of course, she is a LinkedIn influencer herself, which is how we met. So Bree, what's up and welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the intro.
I'm feeling good. Hyped. You should feel hyped. You got a good resume, girl. So, and we're going to dig into it because there's some cool stuff happening with Lyft, and you are a big part of that. So I'm excited to talk to you about it. I think our audience is going to love it. Here's what we're going to discuss on today's podcast. We were talking about the power of the social media social media manager. We're talking about you guys becoming the voice and the face of the brand, and also how you're becoming influencers in the B2B and B2B space in your own right. And then finally, we're going to wrap it up with a little conversation about what it means to build community in the age of the recommendation algorithm. So are we ready to do this?
Sounds good. I have so many thoughts.
I'm excited. I know. I think it's going to be a great conversation. I think our audience is really going to enjoy having your perspective. So before we do that, let's first start with the why. Like, why did you get into social media management? What is it about it that was so interesting to you?
I was, can I curse on this?
Of course.
I was that bitch in college that did, I did 6 internships by the time I graduated. I feel like my classmates probably hated me. It's fine. Anyway, I did like 6 internships by the time I graduated because, well, my dad kind of started his career from only doing internships. My dad didn't graduate college and really values like in-person learning.
Actual experience.
Actual experience, and so I did a bunch, and I did internships in like all sorts of like social media adjacent roles. I did paid, I did content like blog writing, long form. I did social, I did influencer. And I feel like I was gravitating towards social because I feel like it's one of the only opportunities to be truly creative and truly yourself and get paid for it in corporate. Especially these days, like with Threads and stuff like that, you're really being paid to be your authentic self at work. And I feel like that's such a rarity in a job. So that's why I really gravitated towards it. And so I was fortunate enough for my last internship to be at Adobe in kind of like a PR adjacent role. And then I had a bunch of those like intern coffee chats with the team and absolutely fell in love with their jobs and who they were and what they did. And they were talking about all this cool stuff they were doing, like, oh yeah, we're flying out to Vegas to do like shoot a video with Billie Eilish, and then like we're going on Queer Eye to like make some Instagram content. I'm like, okay, I'm writing like an email. That sounds fun. And anyway, I was able to kind of build those relationships with them while I was an intern, and then they thought of me when they had an opening, and I was able to lock like an entry-level position down before I graduated on their social media team, running, helping to manage their brand accounts, which is like the Adobe account for them.
Yes, and I'm very familiar with it because Adobe is one of our largest clients, and so we actually focus on the Adobe video. So I was really excited that you guys that you specifically had done the TikTok brand Adobe account, because we did the Adobe video TikTok account and we grew it to like 500,000 followers, 100 million views in 9 months. And it was a wild ride.
I remember pitching for that when the Adobe video team was pitching that. I forgot that you guys were on that.
Yes, that was us. Yeah, so we're kind of the we were the yin to your yang over there. And just didn't know it.
You were. That's amazing. Yeah. I love that.
That's so cool. Yeah, well, and I think that's a really interesting approach to this. The fact that you had so much experience before you got here is something that professional experience, I should say, is really interesting, because I think if you take a step back, I mean, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but Gen Z, I mean, they've grown up on the internet. We all know this.
Yeah.
You guys are so, like, the internet is your love language. Like, how it you know how it operates. It's not something that you have to like study and research and figure out. A new platform pops up and you get it. It's, I mean, this stuff
Right.
is made for you, right? So
Yes.
I
And I
think
feel
that
like
makes you really powerful.
I
Go
agree.
ahead.
I feel like not enough young people are actually acknowledging that that is experience in of itself. Like I
Yes.
get a lot of students being like, I have no experience. I want to get into this field. I'm like, firstly, there's some things we can do to build your resume, and you should work on that. But
Yes.
also, I think like there is an innate marketable skill for our generation to be like, we've been the audience that y'all have been screaming at for the last 20 years, and now we're
Yep.
ready to scream back at those same people. And who knows how to do that best? The people who are on the other side being marketed to. We've paid attention to how
Exactly.
the internet's changed and worked. We were there when like Instagram stories started becoming a thing. We were the ones
Yeah.
like interacting with brands when like Reels popped up. Like we've been there. So let us take a stab at it. And I think it's one of the few roles in corporate social. Social is one of the few roles in corporate that I think that youth and lack of experience should be valued,
Yes.
because that, like you said, that kind of like innate ability to get the internet is something that shouldn't be ignored, and it's really important for this role.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And I think every generation goes through that. Every generation has their own sort of knack or like their take on, oh,
Yeah,
we were the generation we've been marketed to for X amount of time. So now if you still want to market, we know how it goes. But there's something that's more valuable, I think, even so for Gen Z, because it's not that you've just sat back idly and have been marketed to. You guys are out there creating your own content, building your own
right.
personal brands, your own followings, participating. It's like, it's interactive what you guys are doing. It's not like I'm sitting on this TV and I'm streaming content. That's not
Totally.
it, right? So
Totally.
there
Totally.
are so many skills, and I think for me personally, running an agency that focuses on influencer marketing, some of the most valuable conversations we have are when our most junior folks lean into the conversation, because we have our
That's
senior
awesome.
folks who have been around in this space for over a decade, and so they bring this wonderful sort of past experience of like knowing a little bit like how things are going to go down because of how they used to go down. And then when you couple that with this like new flow of information and insight, that is how you drive ultimate success for a client or for your brand, in my opinion.
That's amazing. I'm so happy you guys are valuing those voices too.
Yeah,
That's
totally. And
awesome. That's so cool.
yeah, and in fact, we're like, I think half the people I talk to on the podcast are found by my junior team, just because
Wow.
because they're so, they're ingrained in how
Yeah, yeah,
things are
yeah.
happening. Like I didn't know. Later today, I'm interviewing Santina Rizzi, who runs the Real Doctor Miami on TikTok, his account, and
Oh,
he's this huge guy. I mean, he's like
yeah.
millions and
It
millions of
rings a
followers,
bell.
and yes,
That's
and
so cool.
I never would have known about that corner of the internet if it wasn't
Yes.
for
There's such an
my teams.
untapped, I feel like that's amazing that you're doing that, because I feel like there's an untapped corner of social media manager circles of the people managing individual people's accounts. Like I'm close
Yes.
on LinkedIn. I'm like LinkedIn friends with the social media manager for Tony Robbins, like the
Oh, that would
motivation
be an
guru.
awesome one. Yes.
But like I want to meet the team behind Kris Jenner really bad.
Yes.
And
Yes.
also I've heard that the team behind Barbara Corcoran, the shark on Shark
Yes.
Tank, is
Yeah,
like
Barbara
she
Cochran.
literally
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
like 12 social media managers because she
Oh, she's
values it
crazy. She has
so
over a
much.
million followers on LinkedIn.
Yeah. She's
Yeah.
amazing. She's
I was just
amazing.
talking to her
And it's
agent the
so
other day.
great
I
to
mean,
see those type of people value this industry. I feel like a lot of the
yeah.
time, especially in larger tech companies like I have experience in, I'm
Hmm.
fortunate that I've had leaders to kind of sell in the value of what we're doing and why we're doing it. But I'll
Sure.
be honest that like the higher you get at a company and the the more seasoned
Hmm.
professionals that you're collaborating with, I feel like there's kind of this like patronizing air when the
Sure.
social team is referenced or walks in the room or walks in the Zoom or whatever, where it's kind of like, oh yeah, the social team can just do their cute little post and like that'll be good. And I think I imagine we're going to talk about is like, no, it's not just a cute little post. We're the arbiters of your entire brand. We're like
Yes.
the first touch point that people have with this entire company. And I'm happy to see that like older, more tenured professionals like the Sharks of the world or the Kris Jenners who really know their shit,
Yes.
like they are putting bank behind a social presence because they understand that even when large corporations can't.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, for better or for worse, the larger the company is, the slower they move, the harder it is to do
Yes.
anything interesting and social, and
Yes.
that's been my case
Totally.
to them for so long. Is like, please, we've seen this time and time again. You have to get on this. It
Totally.
just it takes a while. They move slowly, but I would say they have a lot to protect, right?
Of
Hundreds of thousands
course.
of employees, like lifetime value of brands, all these sort of things. So I understand why they move a little bit slower, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they should ignore channels that move quickly.
And my experience is that the root cause of that like slowness or fear to step into certain things comes from a sort of self-consciousness or insecurity that they don't get it. And I feel like
Yes.
rather than raise their hand and just say, "Hey guys, I literally do not understand what you're talking about with the CapCut template. I don't know what that means," or like literally what is threads, like literally what is threads, help me understand. Instead of kind of raising their hand to say that, it's just kind of like, no, I don't want to do that because they don't want to admit that they don't understand. And that's
Yeah.
why I
Yeah.
feel like there's an opportunity for social teams to kind of, rather than waiting for them to ask those questions, just be proactive and saying like, hey, here's what a CapCut trend is. I'm sure you already know this because you're an expert at everything. But in case you didn't know, this is what this means. This is what we're proposing. And that has really helped us at Lyft. That's like been a mindset shift for me when I got in this role of like kind of
Yes.
mansplaining it a little
Hmm.
bit. So then they can come alongside you, understand that value initially, and then they don't have that insecurity of lack of understanding for what you're trying to do.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's easy to write something off when you don't understand it, right? I've actually been seeing, and not we don't need to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I've been seeing a lot of that around the buzz with threads. A lot of people saying, "Oh, don't worry about it. Just chill. You don't need to be involved on it. Chill. It doesn't matter." And my take on that is like, well, it might matter, and it really depends who your audience is. If your audience is Gen Z, if your brand is built around being culturally relevant and in the mix, you have to be on this, and you have to be on it immediately. It's not in 3 weeks. It's 1, 2 days into the mix, right? That's it. And that probably, if you join the second day instead of the first, it's just because you had some legal stuff that you had to like get through, right? Now, if you are Microsoft, I don't know, Microsoft printers, I'll say, maybe because Microsoft is pretty good on social. But like, if you're selling printers, like maybe you don't need to be on there right away. You could have some fun and take some risks, but like, it doesn't have to be like an immediate strategy. Maybe you focus in on what really works for you and then you figure it out. But I think a lot of people are very quick to dismiss threads as not relevant because it maybe isn't relevant to their core audience.
Yeah,
So,
totally. No, I totally agree. I think there's like a balance. Like you don't want to think too hard about why you're doing it or like a strategy. Just I think you said it well. Like if you value cultural relevance at all, which I feel like there's only a few brands who don't,
right.
then you should be trying it out. I understand not wanting to jump to every platform because that actually like really burns out your social team, and I'm fortunate
Yes.
that our leadership hasn't been like, what about Lemonade? What about Mastodon? What about Spill? What about
Right.
Pinterest? I'm very fortunate that they haven't done that and that they've let us lead on what platforms we want to try. But I feel like with these platforms like Threads that already had so much validity coming from Instagram, you already have
Exactly.
your handle parked there. Just go after it. Why not?
Exactly. Yeah.
Repurpose the tweets. You're already writing tweets. What's there to lose? Anyway, yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. And so thinking about, so you have sort of been spearheading the Threads app launch for Lyft, correct?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I literally was like in a Regal cinema watching Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny,
nice.
and I get a Slack from my VP like they launched Threads one day early because we had prepped for the next day. We had like
Sure.
everything ready for the next day, and then my VP was like, check if you can download it. Let's just do it. Let's just go. So then I couldn't tell you what happened in that Indiana Jones movie.
Oh,
Missed
I'm
the
sure.
ending. But I was threading my ass off, and
I bet
just
you were.
I think like at first, like for the first couple hours, I'm like, okay, all right, let's try this out. But then I saw like all of my colleagues at other brands just like full sending their personality, doing things that I know from like knowing them offline that they've wanted
Uh-huh.
to do and just doing it. And I'm like, let's just see how far I can push this before I get that slack. And that was like our quote unquote strategy for
Yeah.
like the first 2 days of just like, let's see if we can push the envelope. Let's see how people are reacting, and use it as a litmus test for the type of voice that we want to develop here. And the first couple days were really successful and seemed out to work. It seemed to work really well for us.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations. I'm sure it was equal parts stressful and exciting, but it's fun. It's
Yeah.
fun when you get to try new things. And like, I think
Yes.
I saw a lot of people talk about it was like first day of school energy. You're showing up and it's
Oh,
like, oh, who's
totally.
here? What's going on? What's everyone wearing? What's everyone doing?
Totally. And I can't believe now twice in my short career, I have launched a new platform. Like we launched
Right.
Adobe on TikTok when it was new. And I
That's right.
remember like us talking, like when are we going to launch a new platform again? This like
Hmm.
never happens. And then, oh, I guess we also at Adobe launched Clubhouse, which ended up dying.
Ah,
But
right.
so I guess this is like my third time around of like completely launching a platform from scratch, and it's always really fun. Threads in particular feels different because the energy is really positive, which we're all really happy
Yes.
about. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing. And I think I want to touch a little bit about like kind of on one of the things you said about people being themselves, because I think if you look kind of historically at marketing, it's more about the brand identity. What's the brand voice? Who's the brand character? Do we have like a mascot effectively that we're doing? Do we have created a caricature? Who are we? And you're saying, okay, actually, no, you're allowed to be yourself. But what I see in that is that talking a little bit more about these social media managers you included in that as being the main characters of social media, right? And that's because I would assume Lyft, when they were interviewing you, said, okay, Bree's voice, her tone of voice, the way she shows up online is exactly the type of personality that we at Lyft have created and want. And you sort of endear that. And because of it, we can entrust you to show up as yourself because you are a surrogate for Lyft,
Surrogate, a doula,
a doula.
a midwife. Um, yeah, I think it's a lot of that. I also want to add that
Sure.
we don't always get the opportunity to be 100% me. Like there's some things where I
Right.
see and I'm like, oh my gosh, if this was on my personal, the amount of shade I would throw right now, but like
Yes.
reminding myself we're from the brand. I think it's like you know how they talk about how like soft skills can't be taught but hard skills can. It's kind of like that same thinking, like the voice and the tone and the energy and the style
Sure.
can't really be taught. You have to find someone who like fits that the same energy and vibe of your brand, and then the
Yes.
brand guidelines can be taught. What we do and don't talk about can be taught. How we describe like our competitors or other things can be taught, but
Yep.
like the innate, like I don't know, those brand values, you should, I think I totally agree with what you're saying. You should try to find a social media manager that authentically fits those, just who they are. Also, it's really important to find social media managers in your target audience. Like
Yeah.
back in the day when I was interviewing for post grad jobs before I had landed Adobe, like I interviewed with quite a few brands who were like, our target audience is like moms in their 30s. I'm like, that's awesome. I'm not the right social media manager for you because I'm
Totally.
not a part of that community. And so when I see certain brands like asking for 12 plus years of social experience or 20 years of marketing experience for their
Sure.
social media manager, but are also marketing to Gen Z, I'm like, you kind of have to pick one. You can't have
Right.
an authentic Gen Z voice and then hire someone with 20 years of experience. It just doesn't work. So that's why it's important to like find a social media manager that can speak in the voice of the audience that you're trying to capture.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's right. And I think that's also why we're seeing a lot of social media managers, especially with sort of short form video taking off and TikTok taking off. We're seeing a lot of social media managers be cast as not just a social media manager, but as a face of the brand.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Or maybe multiple faces. And I know that there's a little bit of like, not saltiness, but like there's a little bit of like don't push someone into this role. But if you're hired knowing that this is what the company wants and expects out of you, then I think it's great all day long.
Yeah, that is definitely a tricky situation. I wonder, I have also thought about this issue too. I don't show up on the brands,
Sure.
not because I don't want to, but because we hire amazing agencies to make content way better than I could make it. So
Sure.
luckily they show up on the channel. But yeah, that is such an interesting like conversation right now. Like I remember, I feel like this was peak pandemic. I forget the specific brand, but they were like hiring. It was kind of like the stunty move. They were hiring like a chief TikTok officer.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember that. And then they're like,
Several brands have done that. Yes.
yes, and they're like qualifications. You have to be an influencer with like over 500,000 followers or whatever. But then you'll kind of see on LinkedIn like a lot of the corporate social media managers are like, I'm a social media manager and I have 400 followers on my Instagram. It's like I'm curious how that will continue to go because I think there is value in the social media managers who choose to be content creators to show off that they have those audience building skills. But I'm also kind of like speaking through a logo is so different than like speaking as Brie or as like an individual person. And I feel like that should be valued in its own way too. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like it depends on the brand too, like where you lean
does.
into one or the other. But that'll be interesting to see how that develops.
I agree, and I think we've sort of seen it pan out with influencers generally, though, because you started, you have influencers on maybe Snapchat and Instagram and YouTube, right? So you've got right there. In the old days, it was like photos, long form, and then Snapchat was more messaging, and then now you have short form, you have live, so it's like you have all these additional, you have just text based, so you have all of these different styles of communication, and it to me makes sense that you would not hire an influencer who is an influencer on Twitter to do a go live with me on Instagram for your account, because that's a different skill set. So to me, the sort of next wave is, all right, I have several social media managers and each one of them has a different, so this is strategy, your written, your short form, your long form, and then everyone kind of creates content in that way. And that's something that we do actually at the Social Standards is we've called it a few different names, but I think right now we're calling it creator recruiter. But effectively, it's a casting thing. And we'll go through and we will cast different types of creators, whether or not they have followers or not, for roles at brands because they need to fit. Brands need to fill certain slots, right?
Right. I totally agree. I feel like that is the evolution of a social team for sure. I mean, it's kind of like similarly internally, you wouldn't bring your email or push marketing team to help you with a commercial ad campaign. Like you would never do that. They have the specialties and specifications for their specific industry. So why are we asking a social media manager to do a video and a tweet and a thread and a live and a Snapchat story and an Instagram story? Because it's
it's a failed approach, right?
Different creative styles. Yeah. So I'm really happy. I've seen teams evolve that way as people are posting their open positions or talking about how their team's growing. A team that comes to mind that does that, I wonder if they'd be interesting to have on the podcast, is I saw that Square was doing that. Earlier this year, they were posting a bunch of open roles, like one specifically for YouTube, for Instagram, for Twitter. So I think that is definitely the best in class. More teams will get there eventually.
And they will, and I think they have to anyway, because if you look at how search is just converging with social, those two teams are going to have to come together internally at businesses as well. And I think that will just broaden the horizons of everyone, right?
Yeah, totally, for sure.
That's interesting. Now, for Lyft, when you were interviewing with Lyft, how did that process go? Did they talk about you being the voice on social? Did they talk about you being in front of the camera, behind the camera? Like, how was that process
Yeah.
at that time?
Yeah, we didn't discuss a bunch about on camera, but we definitely like went into voice, and it was helpful to
Okay.
have like a portfolio of content that I had written for
Yes.
Adobe. Also at Adobe, and I did this also at Lyft, but I launched our community management program, which was like the formalization of commenting from the brand handle, making sure we're measuring it,
Yes.
doing it at high volume, that sort of stuff. I had launched that at Adobe, so it was great to show off the comments there, to be like, I can do this on the fly and I can do this without preparation, and like here's like 400 comments in the last 3 months to prove it. That was super helpful. So yeah, definitely talked a lot about voice, and they gave me a rundown on like the broad description of our
Hmm.
voice in the interview, so that was helpful. But yeah, we definitely did talk about that, and it's always helpful for social media managers to keep those portfolios of
Yeah.
stuff that they can put their like handprint on and say, I this is literally me talking from the brand account, and use that to inform their next job for sure. Super helpful.
Yeah. And it's great for brands to think about, like, ask that of your social media manager. If they're going to be doing a Threads, a Twitter, a LinkedIn, a written portfolio makes sense, right? Same for
Yeah.
video content. If you're going to be doing a TikTok or a YouTube channel management program. So
Yeah.
I can definitely see that. I mean, do you think, and I know that we talked about how Lyft's approach is that they hire an agency to do a lot of content for for like their TikTok account. Do you think that Lyft will continue to do that, or do you think that they have plans to sort of cast people themselves internally and build that out?
Yeah, I think the future is a combination of both. We're really excited with the partners that we have right now, but I also think that, and we've learned this from Threads, but we've also known it before Threads, that like breaking the fourth wall is so interesting
What do
to
you mean
our
by that?
audience. It's interesting to oh, sorry, what'd you
The
say?
fourth,
What do you mean
like,
by that?
what do you mean by the breaking the fourth wall?
Yeah, breaking the fourth wall in the sense of showing like what's behind the curtain, showing like how the sausage is made,
Got it.
being able, I think on Threads, we're seeing a lot of social media managers, myself included, being like, my boss is gonna love me for saying this, or
Yes.
like me, a social media manager, just asking you to like this thread, or something like that. Um, or like I posted a funny reply the other day where someone was like, silence brand, and then I replied back, I literally can't, it's my literal job. So stuff like that, where you're kind of like exposing
Sure.
what you do, has been really successful for us, not just on Threads but on other platforms. And so with that, I think that's where we want to cast some more internal talent, and that's what we're thinking about right now.
Mm,
But I do
yeah.
want to give like control over the creative experts, and that's you often externally, who know how to do this really well, but then also figuring out where do we want to have our head of product show up on TikTok. We've seen this with brands like Chili's, who put executives
Yes.
on the platform, although that specific stunt was like a fake executive. It was cute, but anyway, do we want our CEO to be on TikTok? Do we want him to
Yeah.
be able to address some of the concerns and questions people have? And I think that's where brands can really bring a new value to their
Well,
audience, is like
and
showing that.
Zuckerberg and Moseri are showing up
Yes,
in social
yes,
in a
the
way that they
series great.
haven't before either. And so I think it paves a really nice path for you to be like, oh, CEO, don't you want to be like Mark Zuckerberg? Here's what he's doing.
Yeah, right.
It's a little bit easier of
Or
a sell
the
job, I think.
Oh, totally. And the TikTok CEO was literally on TikTok
Yes.
during the freaking trial, the like
Yes.
government trial.
Yeah.
Like if he can be TikToking
Say
during
he's just
like
trying to stay in the US. So that's a survival tactic in my opinion.
true. But yeah, there's lots of
But
opportunities there.
yeah, there definitely is. And I think we're even seeing that. I don't want to transition too much here, but even platforms like LinkedIn understand that, right? Because they are now allowing, they would allow like Lyft to boost your personal LinkedIn as like an ad or just to kind of collab it, because they understand that
Yes.
employees have voices and that there's a lot of value there.
Yeah, for sure. The whitelisting on LinkedIn is really cool. I just discovered that recently, and we've
Yeah.
been doing that on TikTok for like brand efforts, but it's interesting to come at that from like an employer branding perspective
Hmm.
of like, can we highlight the voices on our that are
Yeah,
known to be attached with our company, executive or otherwise. But yeah, it's really
exactly.
interesting.
Yeah, well, I think it's important because not everyone is going to, like, if you're not targeting Gen Z or maybe like younger millennials, your brand voice is not as strong in a lot of
Right, right,
ways,
right.
right? So you need some way to humanize your brand,
Yeah.
and you can humanize them through employees, through experts, through influencers, and just by putting other people, associating people with your brand, right? So, I
Yes.
mean, I think that B2C brands in the Gen Z space are still killing it on like all of these fronts, but a lot of other companies are really struggling, and people just don't necessarily care what, like, Pert Plus has to say, maybe. I don't, maybe that's a bad
Yeah,
example,
and
but
what astounds me about that is like, and I'm trying to think of it from an outsider's perspective, but what I imagine is happening is that the folks at the top who kind of make those audience and tone of voice decisions are kind of like, "Oh, we don't want to talk to Gen Z. We're a printer company," like you were using that
sure.
example. But I'm like, guys, the oldest Gen Z is almost 27. That's not
Yeah,
like a
that's true.
12-year-old kid. Like a
Exactly.
27-year-old is buying a printer or a fridge or an HVAC unit or whatever. Like speaking to Gen Z has become almost like an imperative if you're trying to capture any sort of like active consumer audience. I'm
Yeah, that's
25.
true.
I would consider myself to be like a elder Gen Z, but and now the youngest Gen Z is already like 12 or 13. So it's not
Yep,
like a literal child that you're talking to. And so I think sometimes brands are like, "Oh, we don't want to touch Gen Z because we're a printer company." But it's like, well, if you're interested in marketing to like a
true.
27-year-old who owns a home, you kind of have to speak to Gen Z. It's
Yeah,
really
totally.
confusing.
Totally. And I do think some, even like banks and things like that, it's like they want to have, you don't want your bank to be posting memes
Right.
on Twitter. What you want from your bank is like stability and, like, honestly, dryness and just like reliability. And so
Yeah.
that tone of voice is maybe not something you want to engage with, I guess, like
Yeah.
on social. Whereas somebody who works at the bank who's talking about like a really cool thing that they're doing
That's
might
true.
actually be interesting, right?
Yes. I feel like a brand who actually finds that balance perfectly is Lemonade Insurance. It's like this
Oh,
very like
yes.
progressive insurance company that is kind of like breaking the mold. And they do a great job of like, we're gonna speak to you in a way you understand, but not be like, slay queen, mama, hunty,
Yes,
princess.
exactly,
Like
bestie.
they're yeah, they're very just like casual without like being too informal. But anyway, yeah, I totally agree. That's where
Yeah.
it comes really handy to know those internal voices so you can speak through them.
Yes, definitely. It's interesting. It's interesting times, right? I mean, but
Yeah.
humanizing brands, no matter how you do it, is sort of the way to market to people in
Yep.
2023 and beyond, right?
Agreed.
Okay,
Agreed.
so I would say I guess my takeaway from this section of the podcast is that it's not just, you don't just have to put creators and influencers in front of the camera, right? To have social media managers as the main character. You guys have done it really interesting in an interesting way, still from the Lyft account, but mixing in like the breeze of the world, right? And your
Yeah.
tone of voice and all that sort of stuff. And then also, how interesting is it that you guys are using an agency to then create a bunch of content for your TikTok account, in terms of video that works really well there. And you're seeing great success doing that. So just to me, it seems like there are a lot of different ways to kind of skin the cat.
For
But
sure.
for Lyft, it's like content entertainment on TikTok, brand personality on, or tone of voice and like, and that sort of style stuff on Threads and Twitter, and elsewhere.
Yeah. Yep. I would say that captures it for sure. Just leaning into whatever works for your audience.
Yes,
There's so many ways to go about it, but just always prioritizing what they react to best. Sometimes that means your internal folks and sometimes it doesn't. And if it
yep,
doesn't mean your internal folks, making sure that you have a really tight relationship with those people that you can inform and dispel that knowledge of like how you're doing it so it feels like one unified voice.
Yes, totally. One unified voice is an important one because people don't care that it's 600 people putting all this stuff together, right?
Yeah.
It looks
Yeah.
like it can and should look like one brand and one company.
I agree.
All right, so I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about social media managers becoming influencers in their own right, both B2C and B2B, because I think both are really important. So one example that I will pull up, if you have seen, was a couple months. It was back in December, I think, of 2022. The Away, the luggage company, took a bunch of social media influencers on a trip, like a weekend away, right, with Away. And that was really interesting. It was the first time I had ever seen them do anything like that. And it wasn't just Away. They also lumped in like Shake Shack to provide amazing snacks there. They had Say, I think, for some like sunscreen. They had Getaway to kind of said, put your phones up, we're getting away, we're doing this. So they involved other brands and took social media managers out. And it was some of the top performing content, honestly, on their TikTok account. I kind of couldn't believe it. It was 195,000 views is what it got, where normally their stuff only gets like a few thousand views. And then also 729 comments, which were insane because it was brands. It was like mostly brands coming in and saying, hey, we'll do this next time. We'll bring this, we'll do this. And it felt like people.
I know.
Right? It was really interesting.
Cute. It was amazing. And I agree. It was the first time I had seen that too. I was going to reference that example earlier. I'm so glad you brought it up. But yeah, I remember seeing that, and they had all the brand folks there, and like they zoomed in on each of the social media managers' faces and said their brand, and it was so cute. And I feel like there is definitely an opportunity to lean into that, because I think if anything that we've learned from TikTok is like TikTok, the best performing videos are kind of either exposing the truth about something in a positive or negative way, or like sharing vulnerability and authenticity. And I feel like that's another example of that breaking the fourth wall idea. Like you are kind of showing who's behind the curtain in a way that feels fun and feels just like a bunch of friends hanging out, which the TikTok audience is very familiar with. So I feel like, oh, it was just like the perfect example, and I hope there can be more like that. And I want a fucking invite, and I don't know who to ask.
That's right. Like, so Away, you need to get on. Well, you can do a lot.
Maybe we're not as cool or trendy as like Away, but like I can still give some fucking Lyft credits. Like, let's go. I don't know how helpful that would have been in the mountains, but anyway.
Well, you never know. I mean, everyone's got to get from the airport to somewhere at some point, right? So that I think it could be very helpful.
Thank you.
I thought that was such an interesting. I mean, and for our audience who doesn't understand, it was literally like, I mean, Microsoft 365 was commenting there. Lululemon was commenting there. It wasn't just brands that were on the come up and were just trying to get some exposure in the comments. I mean, United Airlines commented. It was, I mean, we're talking big brands, small brands, and it was just so interesting because to me it felt like it was just all these social media managers commenting, and they're all watching. And so it's like Away is showing that they understand how social media works in a lot of ways. They're pulling up who they think are, potential people who their audience may aspire to be like in terms of a professional capacity, right? And then they're also just, I mean, literally setting the stage for brand collabs, like brand to brand collabs, which is wild.
That is what Threads feels like right now to me. Like,
exactly.
Not in a physical IRL activation way, but like, I've been having so much fun commenting from Lyft on like brands that we normally like wouldn't have a reason to engage with. Like, my favorite like go-to drink right now is from this regional like smoothie place called Tropical Smoothie Cafe. It's like only in the South and the East Coast.
Yeah, I know.
And I saw them starting to thread, and I'm like commenting on all their shit. I'm like, me, the social media manager, loves the Island Punch smoothie. Go off, queen. And then I'm like commenting on like random stuff like Slim Jim or Hilton
Ritz Cracker,
or whatever. It's like so fun, and I do have the privilege of knowing like so many of these social media managers individually, or like after I started commenting on all the Tropical Smoothie Cafe stuff, the social media manager like from that brand, I connected with her and like DM'd her on LinkedIn. I'm like, hi, do you want to like be friends? For real? It's like me.
Yeah.
It's me.
But I mean that's like
it's fun.
you guys are fostering business relationships, right?
For
You
sure.
can think about how, like, if your audience goes wild for you guys talking to each other, that sets the stage perfectly for a brand collab, right?
Oh, for sure. I can't share who we're doing that with, but there is
Mm-hmm.
a very, very popular brand on Threads that we started commenting, and then our like team started DMing offline, and we're pursuing a formal like collab with them this year, and it's going to be
There you go.
iconic. Because
Yeah.
literally because of Threads, because of just like you get on the right people's radar, and that's where you have to remember it's literally individual people seeing other
Mm-hmm.
individual people's content, and that's where the connections can really happen. But it's so fun.
But
It's so
it's a
fun.
breeding ground for all sorts of things, right? There's that. I mean,
Yeah.
there's the fact that, like, I'm sure that if you guys are doing a really good job and doing interesting things and interacting with people, that's like a pipeline for potential employees, to like
Yeah.
discover people who are doing interesting and cool things. You could get hired there. I mean, there's so much that could actually happen, and that's, you know, how did you put it earlier? But you guys were like that. Social media managers are the phrase I always go to, the front door to any brand.
Yeah, the arbiters
What
of the brand. Like
the
we
arbiters of the
are.
brand? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why it's important for product teams, for C-suite
Hmm.
level leaders.
Exactly.
At Adobe, we had a full like brand voice team. It's important for those people to be connecting with your social media managers, acknowledge the pain points they have, and build a relationship with them because those people are the ones like executing on your vision
Hmm.
that you've had. Sure, your voice shows up in the emails and the push notifications and the in-person events, but like the first informal touch point that people have is arguably
Yeah.
social, and that's where
Yes.
all of your ideas are executed on, and that's why it's important to not ice that team out or patronize them for posting silly little memes. Like what we're doing is genuinely important, and it's important to have collaborative relationships with the
Yeah.
leadership internally, so then you're doing it the right
Absolutely.
way and everyone feels involved.
Well, and I don't know if you would remember, but there would be like CEOs would go like undercover, and they would be like,
Yes.
maybe it'd be like a Lyft driver, right? I think you guys have done that. Or if you're like Sam Walton, you could go to a Walmart store and pretend to be a customer, or be a diner at a restaurant, and you get the experience of being a customer, and you interact with people, and that knowledge then informs how you maybe create an ad campaign or change a product or any of that sort of stuff, and you have it all here, and it's all trackable, and it all funnels up through the social team. So, I
Yeah,
mean,
it
there's
surprises me the lack of desire oftentimes from internal teams, like when a product is launching, and this isn't explicitly like referencing Lyft, but at my
sure.
experience at Adobe or when I was interning, like why aren't we pulsing the social team? You know, people are talking about this, but I
Hmm.
can't proactively give you insights for a product I don't know is coming. And so that's why
Right.
you, as the product team or the leaders, need to inform us. So then, and we're doing a much better job at that at Lyft recently. I have a really great relationship with our product team recently, and they can be like, hey, in about 8 months from now, we might want to try this. I'm like, great. So now, as I am like going through Threads and Twitter, I can start a bank of proof points for that new feature or
Right.
product.
Yes.
That's where we are really valuable for them. And oftentimes, I don't think leadership truly understands that value.
Sure. Or
Um,
maybe they just don't know that it's even possible, right?
yes, yes, that is true.
Yeah. I mean, I think half of the job for the social team, I think at this day and age, is self advocacy, right? You have to go
Yes,
out there and kind of fight. You've got to have the leader of social in place that can go out and really effectively communicate to leadership and to the rest of the team and build relationships to say, like, okay, great, how
totally.
you've done it with the product team. Great. Now they know, because they didn't know before. They had no idea, right?
That's
But
so
you're
true.
able
Yeah.
to bring that insight um, into the fold. And I think that that's super powerful and super important. And I also think that you guys, not only on the B2C stuff, I mean, like, you're B2B influencers too. I mean, look at you. You have 10,000 followers on LinkedIn, right? And that, we talk about this a lot because we have a B2B influencer division as well at the Social Standard. And the difference between B2B and B2C is massive and also not at all. But the one thing I would say, I would caution people is on LinkedIn, 10,000 followers in your world is big. Okay. But because people don't have a million followers,
Right.
on LinkedIn. They do, but not that big. And the engagement is what you're looking at. And I think you look at some of the posts where um, you'll pop off something and people come back and it's 25 to 300 people are commenting, and that's significant if you're trying to reach social media managers. If I am Slack or Canva or any of these softwares that would be relevant to your market, to your cohort, I want to be
Yeah.
talking to you guys, and I want to be in there, and I want to be gifting you guys stuff and taking you on trips and doing all this, because if you could, let's say you didn't have Slack, right? Let's say you use something else. And if Slack courts you and you are in love with Slack and you are able to sell in Slack to Lyft, that is a huge account for Slack. Huge.
Yes.
You're talking millions of dollars, right? So there's a
Yes.
lot of power.
That's
There's a lot of power in
I
that.
Jess, I've never thought of it that way. Like, I think you're completely reframing it for me. This is like, I totally agree. I've never even like, up until probably like 6 months ago, I was flying without a strategy and just vibing. And I love talking
Yeah.
about work. I love
Sure.
talking about work. So I'm like, okay, cool. People want to hear me talk about this. This is cool. And then once I started connecting with the larger creators who are like, no, this is like a pipeline for brand partnerships, also like for collaborations between other brands and ours. And yeah, I think that the way you just described it is really helpful, and a reason for more people my age to get on LinkedIn,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
we are like a marketable like funnel for these larger companies. And when I often talk about Airtable a lot on my
Yes.
platform, which is like an example of like one of those softwares that I love. I just do that organically because I fucking love Airtable. But
Yep.
like we've talked like offline of like, do we want to do like a collaborative like workshop? Do we want
Yeah.
to like make some video content together? Like that's where there's so many opportunities for LinkedIn creators to do more of that. So yeah, that's such a healthy way to describe it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I really think that it's I really think it's impactful and very very meaningful, and so I think we're going to start to see more of that. And
Yeah.
I think that the possibilities really are endless. I mean, so many people I know on LinkedIn just keynote a lot, you know, and
Yeah,
that's something too, because if you're thinking about like social media week in New York, well, if I'm running that event, I probably want to talk to some of the top social media managers and top social media minds and get them to come in and talk, and that's how you sell tickets and events and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot, I think there's a lot to be said and a lot to be done in that space, um, and we're just sort of on the cusp of it, which I get really excited about. I just think it's so
totally. Well,
I
I
think it's
mean,
so
the
cool.
stat that I always share, and I don't know how, when this has, if this has
Sure.
been updated, but the stat that I always like is that under 3% of LinkedIn users post at all.
Yes.
So like it's kind of like, you know how when a new platform pops up, you're always like, "Oh, I wish I could have told my old self to just start posting on
Yes.
TikTok." And now I could have been Addison Rae or something. You always have that very delusional
Yes.
dream that you tell yourself. But
Sure.
anyway, LinkedIn is that place for
It
people, and they
is.
don't
Yes, it
realize it.
is.
Like literally under
100%.
3% of people are posting.
Mm-hmm.
Go after it. Go get it. Maybe
Exactly.
it won't.
Yeah.
It's maybe probably not as liquid as like a TikTok or an Instagram influencer audience, but
Sure.
there is value. What I tell people is like, especially people who don't get LinkedIn are often like, why are you posting on LinkedIn? Are you looking for a job? Are you like trying to slide into some DMs? And I'm like, no, I'm posting on LinkedIn to further my presence within my company,
Yes.
because I get
Exactly.
now, instead of waiting for that next project to come that is like perfectly in my strong suit, now I'm posting about it whenever I want, and I have the right people internally knowing what I can do rather than waiting for that project to prove it to them. I'm talking about
Exactly.
it and having that thought leadership regardless of what I'm doing at the company, and that's where it's been
Yeah.
really valuable for me.
So that's interesting because I hadn't thought about it necessarily as a way to do things internally at your current company. But I guess that does make a
Especially
lot
for
of
younger
sense, right?
people.
Yeah. Well, and as you mentioned, I mean, Gen Z, the older side range of Gen Z is at 27, and I think that's also why we're starting to see some of the, we're not going away from authenticity, but people are starting to like, aspiration is starting to creep back in because personal
Yeah.
brands are a big deal, right? And you think about, even you can see it within the social media manager communities, whether it's on LinkedIn, or I know you guys like to, I see a lot of stuff on TikTok or like even Discord. But there
Yeah.
are all of these little communities where you guys are sharing and creating, and then you become sort of the leader, and this like the career professional aspiration. I want to do the job that Brie has. Like I'm going to follow her. I'm going to pay attention to what she's doing. You know, all of these things, and so you build this personal brand, which is the ethos. I feel like of the will be the ethos of like the mid to late
Yeah.
20s basically. Um, and Gen Z loves a good personal brand.
Oh, yeah,
So,
totally. And I
right?
feel like I often feel like people my age are intimidated by that phrase because they feel like it involves some like PowerPoint that you have to make for yourself. And it's like it's really like not that hard. Like the
Right.
way that my friend Ronnie at Adobe had described personal branding to me was like your personal brand is the three things that people think about you when they hear your name, and
Yes.
just go after it with that angle. Don't
Hmm.
worry about like your like 5-year, 10-year plan. Don't worry about a posting strategy. Don't worry about your stupid brand colors or anything like that. Like,
Right.
focus on what are the three things people want to
Yeah.
remember your name for right now, and that's what I lean through, and I hope that shows up in my content. But you just want to be top of mind for the right people, both
Hmm.
internally at your company and externally. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
just go start fucking posting. There's literally less than
Amen.
3% of us. Go get
Exactly.
it.
And I see it all the time, even on some of my posts that don't get very much engagement. I still see, you can still see the impression numbers. And so you can,
Yeah.
at least you have like you have a good, idea. And
Yeah.
another thing that's pretty common with B2B influencers, that from my conversations and even my own personal experience, not that I'm an influencer yet, but like just knowing from posting, right, is that you get they get a lot of leads and interesting things happening for people that never even engaged with their content. So
Yes.
people are
Totally.
watching. They're lurking. LinkedIn's full of lurkers that are just sort of not sure what to do. It's like, hey, I'm here, but I don't want to like it. And I don't know, so I'm just going to read it and move on, right?
Yes.
But that's fine.
Totally.
That's fine, because if that ends up turning into a job opportunity, an internal project, a new business lead, like those are all good things. Those are all good things that can come from LinkedIn when you're posting. So I encourage everyone also to get out and go do it, because you really have nothing to lose. I mean, at the end
No.
of the day, what's the worst to happen? You delete everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't
And
like it?
if it helps you, if you feel self-conscious, block people that you need to block, that you
Yeah,
feel
totally,
self-conscious about. Just do what you got to do, and speak your shit. You have some
yeah,
everyone has something valuable to say and stories to
hundred
share.
percent.
Like, don't compare yourself to the
No,
super creators on the app. Like, you have your own thing that you can find
exactly.
you're talking
Yes,
about.
hundred
It's not
percent.
too
And I even
late.
encourage like our employees too. I say, hey, we have actually a Slack channel where I say, drop your LinkedIn post here, and we will all
Oh,
go out and like
cute.
it. Because
Aw.
you want to feel good. Like it's not, you don't want, nobody wants to post something and then just have it like crickets, right?
Oh, I
Um,
love that. That's so
yeah. So we
cute.
said we'll support internally, and then that helps, all the things. So I think
Yeah.
that's a good strategy, honestly, for most companies. If you need one, that's my advice. So um, okay, so here is, let's see. I want to get back to B2C influencers a little bit. Like, do you think that social media people who go for the social media manager role, do you think that they ultimately want to become creators themselves in their own rights, or do you think that a lot of them like to be behind the scenes
I
doing?
think a lot of us like to be behind the scenes for sure.
Hmm.
I especially I think at the larger brands. I feel like
Okay,
smaller brands maybe have that intersection more. Or
sure.
I feel like where those types of social media managers that are also creators, where they show up is like in freelancing. Like a lot of people who
Uh-huh.
maybe have their
Absolutely.
own large presence, but then
That makes
as a
sense.
supplement to their creator income will freelance for a specific brand. I've heard of CEOs wanting to hire comedy Twitter writers. I've heard
Yep.
of like brands wanting to hire a TikToker to be an internal embed for like 6 months just to capture content
Yes.
during a busy season or whatever.
Totally.
So I feel like that's where those types of creators really show up in the corporate social media space. But I feel like, at least in the dialogue I'm having with my colleagues at other large brands, we're all kind of like, I'm just trying to do cool shit over here, and I don't necessarily want people to like be hating on me personally. Like it's also
Sure.
such a different mentality you have to be in because receiving a hate comment from Lyft is so different than someone being like, Bree, you are bad. Like you
Right.
personally are bad and I don't like you. Like that
Yeah,
is a
that's
total
true.
different like mental game you have to play when you have your own audience that I feel like we shouldn't put that pressure on social media managers to
Yeah, that
be
makes
willing to
sense.
do both. Um So I guess those are my thoughts there. But maybe that will change
Hmm.
as like more positive platforms like Threads start coming up where it's like less of a toxic space.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true. Huh.
but yeah.
That makes sense. Well, and I've noticed some brands have their social media managers sign like a tweet or a post or
Yes, I
something
hate
along
that.
those lines. So okay, so tell me why. Why do you hate that? Because I know some people say, "Hey,
Well,
this
they
is a
do
way for
that.
me to like feel like who get humanize the brand effectively."
Yeah, I feel like there's such a, I don't know, I feel like there's a difference between like taking a peek behind the curtain and then like boner killer for like who you're talking to. Like when
Mm-hmm.
uh, when people sign off on tweets, it's usually in that customer management or like
Got you. That makes sense.
what am I thinking? What's the
Customer
term I'm
service.
thinking?
Yeah.
Yes, customer service. And so I kind of get that, but I see brands I love the team over at Canva. I know them and I love them, but they do this on community management where it could
Okay.
be like, "Oh, we love your design, XOXO Bob," or something like that. Like I think
Yeah.
there is a great place to just keep it at the brand because that's where that magic is. Like at Disney, there's a reason you don't know who's behind the mouse suit because you want to be interacting with the mouse. You don't want to be interacting with
Right.
Catherine behind the Minnie Mouse costume. Like you want to be interacting with Minnie.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah,
don't
totally.
know
You're right.
who that person is. So I think
Yeah.
like similarly that's how brands should lean into like with the brand account. Like people want to be interacting with Lyft, they don't really care about me, Bree.
Sure.
They think it's cool that they're like hearing from Lyft. I think someone on Threads this week said like, I love all the brand's energy on this app. It feels like we're in like one giant group text with my favorite brands. And I felt like
Yes.
that was really cool. And that's where I think we should kind of keep the magic.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I think that again, I think it's going to always sort of depend on your brand and your strategy and how you show up. But I love the idea of keeping the magic.
Yeah,
I think that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that is really interesting. That's a good point. And then sort of I'll take this into community management a little bit here as well. So
Yeah.
you just mentioned it a little bit, but how do you is community something that you are actively trying to build on Lyft's social platforms? And if so, how does recommendation algorithms play into that?
Yeah, I mean, community is that word that's thrown around a lot in like internal big strategy decks,
Uh
like
huh.
goal number one, build community. We actually
Sure.
don't have build community as our main social goals. We've like
Okay.
removed that language because it's not measurable and it
Sure.
also kind of, I mean, arguably it's not measurable. You could argue
Sure.
that you can measure it in some way with follower count, but I don't think
Hmm.
followers are indicative of like a healthy community.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
but anyway, we've kind of taken that off because it's also kind of like a no shit. It's kind of like if you
Hmm.
put on your social goals, like, we want to make cool content. That's our goal. Like, oh, like, yeah, we want
That's
it to
so
be.
different than everyone else, right?
Yeah, 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 exactly. So I think like the way that I'm approaching it is prioritizing community building through that community management lens, which we define at Lyft as showing up in positive mentions of Lyft from the Lyft brand handle. So maybe that's someone being like, meet Marissa, my amazing driver from the weekend. She had like a pride themed Lyft and it was amazing. Like we should be showing up as Lyft in the comments being like, we love
Yeah.
Marissa, and maybe we repost that content. Or what I've worked to build over the last quarter is having a pipeline so we can drop ride credits in people's accounts. So like
Yes.
there was an example on TikTok where an influencer was like, the Uber was way too expensive, and so I had to walk home from a bottomless brunch, like practically blacked out. And so we commented from Lyft, being like, "You should never have to walk home from a bottomless brunch. Like, if Uber was too expensive, here's $400 in Lyft credits or whatever." That's what
Wow.
we want to do more of that. We're actually doing
Yeah,
something
that's a huge
super
one.
fun with that today that I'll send you. But oh my gosh, the internet is about to love what we're doing today with that.
Oh,
We're like
wow. Well, I'm
surprising
excited.
we're surprising an individual writer with a really, really big gift. But anyway, I'll send it to you. But so I think
Yeah,
that's
that's
where the
exciting.
community happens. Like, I feel
Yeah,
like we don't
totally.
have to overthink it. Build like relationships with your individual like audience members. Also, a really sorry, I'm like ranting on this, but
No,
I
it's
think it's
fine.
really fun. Another really fun thing I like to do is when it's those same commenters kind of like hyping you up over and over again, follow them back, engage
Yes.
on their stuff. Like, that's what you would do if you were an influencer or a friend. Like, if there's someone who's always kind of hyping your posts up, you would give the love back on stuff that isn't even related to you. So
Totally.
that's what I've started doing, and I
I
think the
think that is
reception's
the
great.
new surprise and delight. Like what you just sort of laid out there is the new version of surprise and delight, right? For
Yeah,
customers. It's like following back is huge. People love that. That feels so good. And then also going in and just gifting people stuff randomly is so awesome. And what I like about that is it's like you have a decentralized view on community where your community
yeah,
is everywhere and you're going to meet them where they're at instead of trying to pull
yeah.
it all in and own it in one spot.
I love that. I think that's exactly right. That's the right
Yeah.
approach. Yeah.
I think that's
I like
interesting. And I think it flows really well with the sort of entertainment mode that social media is going into, right? Because you don't have to worry about everything being right here on Lyft. You can just go through all the corners of the internet and find people and sort of connect with them. So,
Totally. Oh my gosh, we have so much fun stuff planned. Like I'm working with our TikTok agency. We're thinking of like
okay.
how do we show up in those super niche events that people have, you
Yes.
know? Like there's an olive oil festival in like Arkansas. How can
Yes.
we like as Lyft like kind of show up for that super niche community in that way? Or like we're experimenting on threads like talking about Disney adults because we have these
Yes. I
like
saw the
Disney
minivan, right?
yeah, the minivan. We have these like themed lifts at Disney World, and it's like Disney adults is such like a buzzword right now and like a niche community within the internet. So like how do we tap those and find our way in to talk to those people? Because whether you're a part of that
Yes.
community or you're outside watching it, it's so interesting to like see how a brand can show up for those people. So definitely more of that to come for
Oh,
sure.
yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, the internet is nothing besides a collection of niches at the moment, right? So
Yes,
knowing
right.
knowing those and how to get in there is definitely important.
Totally. It's totally changed in that way. I think for the better, but I
Yeah.
love it. I think you're totally right. Like a collection of niches. That's so cool.
Yeah,
Sorry,
absolutely.
my
Cool.
cat is like hunting a fly and screaming in the
Look, you gotta
corner.
eat, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
too funny. Well, Brie, this was such an interesting conversation. I had so much fun. I really appreciate you coming on, and I hope that we can do it again soon.
Yeah, and I want to meet in person.
Yes, please. We have to.
Let's
We're
do
in
that.
Nashville, so we've got to do that for sure.
Yeah,
Cool.
let's do that. Well,
All
thank you so
right.
much for having me. This was fun.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We'll do it again soon.